Thank you, Aaron, and good morning, everyone. Welcome, both in the sanctuary and online, to the Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg on the unceded ancestral lands of the Tocobaga and Seminole Native Americans. My name is Bill Motter, and I'm a member of the Worship Committee. I have some good news and some bad news this morning. So the good news is we have a choir for the first time in 2.5 years. The bad news is the choir director is quarantined today. So if you showed up to hear the choir this morning, I'm sorry if I'm disappointing you. I'm excited to bring you today's worship service. Does my vote change anything? Along with today's worship associate, my brother John Motter.
Thanks, Bill. We are people of many beliefs, but we share a common faith. That what we do in this world matters, and that we are connected to one another and to our planet. Whoever you are, wherever you are in your journey, you are welcome here. We have a few announcements. We're sorry about the heat. The air conditioning company we've been dealing with has not been able to fix the problem. Be assured, we know it's a problem. Buildings and Grounds, I'm sure, is tired of the problem. But we're aware of the situation, and we are trying to get it fixed and working again. An announcement from Mary Neal Jones. Mary Neal wants to let everyone know that the service for her late husband, Barry Jones, will be facilitated by Patty Hanks at 2 p.m. This coming Saturday afternoon, which is November 12th, here at UUSP. She welcomes anyone who wants to help us remember and celebrate her husband, Barry, and then the reception will follow afterwards, the service in Gilmore Hall.
Also, a reminder, and you'll see it a little handout in your order of service, that there are still tickets available for the cabaret, and that's on Sunday, November 13th at 4 p.m. in Gilmore Hall. And Susan Bernor is also asking for some volunteers. I think there are still 20 tickets available, and it promises to be a really great show. I also want to give a special welcome to any newcomers. If you want a church where we believe that abortion is health care, that women's rights are human rights, and that voting makes a difference, I have good news. You may have found your church home. If you are new to UU St. Pete, or even relatively new, can you give a wave? Welcome, everyone. If you'd like, please stand and introduce yourself. You are under no obligation to say anything, but if you're willing, we'd love to hear from you. I will repeat what you say so those YouTubers can hear you. Welcome, Roger and Debbie. So that was Roger and Debbie, who moved here just about a month ago.
My name is Chris. I'm from Fort Stewart, Northern Ireland. I was at UU in Massachusetts for 30 years.
So that was Chris from Northern Ireland, and he was a UU in Massachusetts for 30 years. And I see two familiar faces, but and for our YouTubers, that was Paul and Sarah Craig. It's really nice to see them in the sanctuary this morning. Great, that was Sandy and Lauren, so we're really happy to see them this morning. And I see somebody way in the back. And that was Fran Quinn. And there's somebody that was it Philip? Philip, who's was here for a wedding and attends the UU Arlington Street Church in Boston. Well, this morning, Lauren Lorenzen, Rob Wallace, and Kelly Olson are live streaming and running the soundboard. And we have 5 terrific greeters this morning, and we want to thank them and also our RE volunteer. Masks are now optional in our worship service, so let's take a moment to greet our neighbor and remember to get consent if you're going to reach in and hug them or shake their hand.
I looked at them. I thought we hadn't done. Yeah, on the top. Yeah. Our flaming chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism. It is a symbol of hope, the sacred, the quest for truth, the warmth of community, the light of reason, and so much more. When Vanda lights our chalice, I invite you to say our covenant out loud. The words can be found in the text chat, and feel free to follow along with the 2 hand movements. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now please rise as you are willing and able for our first hymn, Building a New Way. It's number 1017 in the teal hymnal, and Vonda and a couple people are going to come up and help lead the choir. Because you don't want Bill and I leading the choir, that's for sure, I'll tell you that.
And I want to thank Vonda and Joanne for spur-of-the-moment request to come up front. So thank you very much. So now it's time for all ages. And would all the children that would like to come forward? We've got a little story for you today about voting. And we have props, so we'll see how well this goes this morning. Okay. Would you like a prop? A voting paddle? Jade? Everybody gets a little voting paddle. Here you go, you can take one. Hi, Lillian. Would you like a paddle? This isn't a bad paddle, this is a voting paddle. So how many of you have a bedtime that your parent or parents enforce? That looks like most of you. And how many of you have chores that you do around the house? Like, clean your room, that's a good one. What else?
I wash my mommy dishes for her.
You wash dishes, okay. Any others? Well, today, we're going to vote. And this may be a pretend vote, but I want you to remember that you only get one vote. So you're going to have to think about this, what you want your choice to be. We'll pretend that you have to make a choice between staying up later for your bedtime, and if you do that, you have to do more chores. Or you can just keep things the way they are. Same bedtime, same number of chores. You got that? So what do you think about those two choices? Is staying up later, is that something you'd really like to do, even if you have to do more chores? No? That's a green paddle. Do you want to stay up later, even if you do more chores? I see some reds. So what about you're happy to do more chores if that means you get to stay up later? Okay, there's still some reds. What if your friend likes to stay up later, but you like to go to bed early and you don't mind doing chores? Are you going to try and convince them to vote your way?
No.
No? You'll let them vote their way and you'll vote your way?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in our system of voting, we often get just two choices. And whatever the vote turns out affects everybody, even the people that vote against it. So it's important to consider what makes you happy, but also what makes your friends happy, even if it's different from your first choice. So we're going to do one last vote here so everybody can see. I want you to hold your paddles high. So if you want to keep your chores the same and your bedtime the same, raise your green side of your paddle. All right. Oh, there's a red. So what if you want to stay up later and you're happy to do more chores? What's your vote there? Well, it looks like a toss-up, so I'm going to let your parents decide, okay? So you'll have to let us know whether you get to stay up later and how many chores you're doing. Now it's time to sing the children out. Our view from the pew today comes from Amy Weintraub, Reproductive Rights Program Director, Progress, Florida.
As a UU for more than 20 years and a sometimes visitor to this congregation, I know how hard we UUs fight for fair elections, to advance voting rights, to protect abortion access, and to resist the targeting and criminalization of Black folks and other people of color. My work as the Reproductive Rights Program Director at Progress Florida is grounded in two core beliefs. The first is our UU Fifth Principle, which calls for the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The second is my belief that unless those of us with uteruses can control our own childbearing, we will never reach our full potential nor have autonomy over our life's plan. The healthiest and happiest societies in the world allow folks to control if and when they have children, how many children they have, and the spacing between them. Without that, we're setting up half of our population to be at the mercy of chance. I believe that my role as a champion for progressive values generally and for reproductive freedom specifically is more important now than ever. I believe that UU's role as part of the groundswell of voting rights, electoral work, and democracy movement is more important than ever. With increasing control of our government by corporations and special interests, with voter suppression, and with the alarming rise of authoritarianism, we face many challenges to ensure that our democracy stands. The only hope is our continued engagement as advocates, as social justice warriors, and yes, as individual voters casting our one ballot. There is much at stake in Tuesday's election. I know you all know that. But no matter what happens, together, UUs and allied groups must continue to work to address the current threats to our democracy and human dignity. We must continue campaigns to decriminalize poverty, defend the rights of LGBTQ people, fight for reproductive freedom, protect the environment, and end migrant detention and deportation along with mass incarceration. Our prayer today is for democracy to be a spiritual practice of accountability that resists fascism. Our fifth principle demands it. Anything else is against our religion.
Thank you so much, Amy. Yasmina Blackburn, writer and activist, explains her thoughts on the connection between voting and spirituality. My parents came to America from environments of oppression to live the American dream. Voting has always been a testament to what my parents and ancestors have endured. I will always exercise my right to vote. My faith in Islam also inspires me to vote. God does not answer prayers unless you are doing your part, unless you are trying. He makes it incumbent on all humans to continually strive to improve their condition. Islam is an active religion, not a passive one. Sitting home is not an option, Islamically speaking. And then some additional words from Sharon Salzberg, co-founder of Insight Meditation Society. It may seem strange to relate spirituality and voting, but the faith that I think about in the context of voting is completely nonpartisan. It's about recognizing voting as an immense form of freedom we're given. We have the choice to participate in the outcome of our own lives, the lives of others, and the country as a whole. Each of our influences on any outcome may be incremental, but it exists and is a critical component of change. In that way, each one of our choices to step up and take action has an immense impact on each other and on the world's future.
Thank you, John. Now we come to the time in our service for joys, sorrows, and concerns. This service is being brought to you via YouTube Live, So please type your joys and concerns into the text chat. If you have a joy, sorrow, or concern to submit during the week, please write to Kelly Olson at officeadmin@uustpete.org. If you would prefer it to remain off YouTube, let her know when you submit it. So Susan Bernor, one of our greeters this morning, will place a stone in the water for each one that has been submitted this week.
So we have 3 from Debbie Polis Carter. A stone of joy for my friend Kelly McRae, who bravely fought for her country in the Gulf War and against lupus in her body, becoming a tireless lupus warrior. She is no longer in pain. A stone of joy for my friend Claire Wodrowski, who is a brilliant lawyer and animal advocate. She is free from the pain of a 5-week diagnosis of advanced ovarian cancer. And then finally, a stone of joy for my friend Kay, who is recovering in the hospital from open heart surgery following a heart attack, less than a week after she had a basketball-sized ovarian tumor removed. It seemed the tumor was a blessing in disguise to find the underlying heart disease. Hug your people and tell them you love them.
May we bring to mind and hold close to our hearts those known and unknown who are facing health concerns. May we also continue working for universal health care in our nation, so no one need worry about the financial burden in receiving needed health care. May all who are facing challenges, known and unknown, find a comforting presence in the warmth of fellowship and community. And we will place a final stone for those joys and concerns that remain in our hearts, perhaps too tender to be spoken out loud. Let us take a moment of silence together. The mystery is that we are connected, even when we feel apart. Let us rejoice in our beloved community that makes of the many one. So may it be.
Bill, I think we should have auctioned off those voting paddles after the time for all ages. We could have made some good money for people that are sweating out in the church. So, thank you. Thanks for being patient with the heat. The next reading is by Anantanand Rambakan, professor of religion at St. Olaf College. If you're a fan of the TV show The Golden Girls, you'll recognize St. Olaf as the hometown of Rose Nyland, aka Betty White. An election should be a time when a nation engages in a process of deep discernment. Discernment must be guided by the light of the knowledge and not ignorance, by a passionate concern for seeking truth and not falsehood, and by a commitment to what ultimately matters, not the trivial. Sadly, what we see today is a reckless indifference to the truth and an appeal to narrow self-interest, untruths that demean others and that stir hate and fears are peddled daily. The attainment of power, and not truth and wisdom, has become the object of ultimate value. Truth is equated with expediency and convenience and redefined as that which ensures electoral victory. That the means justifies the end. More specifically, what is the truth that matters in the voting booth? The Hindu tradition answers with an explicit moral criterion. The Bhagavad Gita advises us twice that all choices must be exercised with the concern for the universal common good.
A. Philip Randolph, an American labor unionist and civil rights activist, stated, "A community is democratic only when the humblest and weakest can enjoy the highest civil, economic, and social rights that the biggest and most powerful possess." Voting is a right, a privilege, and a powerful act of civic engagement. The most often heard excuse for not voting in an election is, "My one little vote won't make a difference." Yet history is full of instances proving the enormous power of one single vote. Let's consider some of those numbers. In many cases, the courses of nations has changed because one individual ballot was cast, or not cast, depending upon your point of view. Consider this. In 1649, one vote literally cost King Charles I of England his head. The vote to behead him was 67 against and 68 for. The axe fell thanks to one vote. In 1776, one vote gave America the English language instead of German, at least according to folklore. In 1941, the Selective Service Act, the draft, was saved by a one-vote margin just weeks before the attack on Pearl Harbor. And more recently, in 2016, a Vermont State House seat was determined by one vote out of 2,000. The closest presidential race between George Bush and Al Gore came down to the votes in just one state. Yes, you probably recall that was Florida. After an historic recount of the Florida vote and a Supreme Court decision, George W. Bush was declared the winner with just 271 electoral votes, one more than the minimum needed to win. The race was decided by a margin of 537 votes. And some more personal voting facts. In Glenwood Junior High School, which served 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, I ran for student council. I don't recall specifics of my campaign platform, but I do recall it was a tight race between Greg Burton, an excellent student and talented athlete, and me, a non-athletic French horn band geek. To this day, I believe I owe my victory to my campaign manager, Tom Eddington, who came up with this clever slogan, "Do what you oughter, vote for Mater." Corny, yes, but sometimes corny and catchy is what wins, at least in junior high school. And you need votes. In the final tally, I won by a margin of 5 votes. It may have been my appeal to the younger demographic, the 7th graders, that resulted in my victory, but it impressed upon me the idea that every vote counts. I lived in Washington, D.C. for many years. In the House of Representatives, the district is represented by a delegate who is not allowed to vote on the House floor and can only vote on procedural matters and in congressional committees. DC residents have no representation in the Senate, and I still voted. I lived in Oregon for 17 years before moving to St. Petersburg. Oregon politics are somewhat dominated by a single party due to the political demographics of its largest metropolitan area, and rarely is the outcome a surprise. I still voted. For me, voting is not just about the numbers. It is about what John referred to in his readings. The act of voting and the preceding thoughts and preparations have the power to change me. My first memory of voting and the responsibilities surrounding it was with my father. I couldn't have been more than 10, and my father took me with him to the polling place in our small Ohio town. I have no idea whether it was a primary or general election or what important issues might have been on the ballot. That was hardly the highlight for me. The impression made upon me in that moment, which has stayed with me throughout my life, was the reverence and responsibility associated with casting a vote. I don't know if the polling place was a school or some other facility, but I do recall the mystical nature of a chain being pulled and small curtains closing around us. I watched as my father contemplatively pressed buttons and eventually ended the solemn activity with a grand finale, pulling down on a large lever, completing the process and opening the curtains that protected this secretive activity. It felt like a combination of a Vegas slot machine handle and the curtains and levers that were operated by the great and powerful Oz. I was forever hooked on voting and have continued to grow in reverence and wonder of what it really means to me. The following are excerpts from the Practicing Democracy Project feature by Mary Ann Broussard. An ancient king in India sentenced a man to death. The man begged that the sentence be rescinded and added, "If the king will be merciful and spare my life, I shall teach his horse to fly in a year's time." "Done," said the king, "but if at the end of the period the horse cannot fly, you will be executed." When his anxious family later asked the man how he planned to achieve this, he said, "Well, in the course of a year, the king may die, or the horse may die, or who knows, the horse may learn to fly." I remember this teaching whenever I hear someone say they don't see much point in voting, adding such comments as, "What difference could my vote make?" Or, "The polls show that so-and-so is going to win anyway." Or, "I live in a strong blue or red state, so they don't really need me to take the time to vote." The truth is, we don't ever really know what is going to happen. That horse could learn to fly, but first, somebody must make the effort to train him. What we can know is the value of the act of voting itself. Voting asks you to get in touch with your authentic self and identity and identify what is important to you. Voting connects you with your neighbors as you consider the programs and policies that affect all of you. And voting encourages you to consider the larger whole of which you are a part. The American motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Voting does what spiritual practices do, connect you with your true self and your community. Buddhists say that whenever we meditate or do another kind of spiritual practice, we accumulate merit. At the end of a session, practitioners dedicate that merit to a cause, for example, to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings. This extends the impact of the practice beyond the individual to a larger community. Let's look at voting as a spiritual practice in this way. How do we dedicate its merit? How do we make it more than an exercise of voting for candidates, rather a way to engage for or on behalf of others? Compassion is opening your heart, allowing yourself to feel the suffering of others and to seek ways to support them. You can do this with your vote. Think about the candidates and the programs that they are promoting. Which ones require you to close your heart? Which ones encourage you to open it? Does your vote expand the circle of your compassion? Hospitality needs our vote in these times. This spiritual practice involves welcoming guests, especially strangers, into our lives, crossing boundaries and dismantling barriers. Look at the choices you are asked to make on ballot propositions. Do some support hospitality? Do some suppress it? Which candidates are advocating hospitality? Gratitude also belongs at the polling place. What do you appreciate about your government and the work of your elected officials? How can you vote your thanks to school teachers, first responders, and military personnel? Kindness is one of my favorite spiritual practices, and I like to vote for people I perceive to be kind and for projects that extend kindness to others, especially the poor. Many proposals put forward in legislative sessions, whether on the city, state, or national level, reflect government generosity and care. But plenty of proposals are designed to punish some groups or deny them the needed services. Consciously remembering to prioritize kindness in my ballot choices is one way to counter such meanness. Finally, hope belongs in the voting booth. This positive and potent spiritual practice has the power to pull us through difficult times. It fuels our courage, commitment, perseverance, and resilience. These are all good virtues to carry with you when you are voting. Hope will help you make choices that align with the concerns of your deepest self. Does voting change anything? Maybe the pertinent question is, does not voting change anything? Still me. I was so glad to have that over with. So please stand as you are willing and able for hymn number 318 in the gray hymnal, We Would Be One.
Now let us remember our connection to one another, and let us not forget our contributions to support the means to those connections. The link to give online is in the description box below your screen. You can also donate through the Vanco Faith Engagement mobile app or on our website under the Giving tab at uustpete.org or by sending a check to the church office. We have benefited from the efforts and contributions of previous generations. Our spiritual ancestors planted the vision of this fellowship, They sowed with their physical labor and the financial labor the harvest we are now enjoying. We follow in their footsteps and plant trees, knowing that we might not be the ones to enjoy the grandeur and harvest the fruits. May our offering be one of the many ways in which our hands and the intentions of our heart make manifest our love for one another in the world. In the sanctuary, our ushers will now pass the offering bowls. If you are a newcomer here, please refrain from making a donation. This service is our gift to you, and your presence here is your gift to us. The offering will now be given and received.
If the choir had been here, we'd either have gone the whole hour, so you can either thank me or curse me, whichever way you feel about that. Now feel free to follow along with the hand gestures as Vonda extinguishes our chalice. The words of UUSP's traditional chalice extinguishing are in your order of service and online in the text chat. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of courage. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world. Go in peace and go vote if you haven't already.